Hi, this is Dr. Randy Hurst. I'm doing this video on fear as what I refer to as monster in my monster-making metaphor. Now, for some foundation about how fear can become that monster that can cause huge problems, it's important to describe also its value. Years ago, I ran across, I can't remember now if it was natural history or nature, or it was a small journalish kind of publication that my father-in-law had. And it was an article by Stephen Jay Gould, who is a paleontologist and evolutionary biologist who is fascinating. He's got some fun books. Bully for Brontosaurus is the one that comes to mind. But he was writing about something that struck me about the evolution of man. And I'm not sure he exactly said it this way, but what I took from it is that fear was very primary to early man because man was prey. You look back, or what they've found in looking back, is that on two legs, man was slower than four-legged animals. We're weaker than most other animals. So if we're slower and we're weaker, what are we? Prey. And so one of the things that, growing up in Montana, going to Germany this last year to see my daughter, I went for walks every day, and there was quite a few deer over there, and I would see them growing up. But what's fascinating to me is that in order to get a drink of water, in order to eat, the deer are always looking around to see if it's safe. And in the process of getting a drink of water, they might have to look around a couple, 3 times before they actually get any water. You know, even when I was 300, 400, 500 yards away, the deer would be very wary, and if I looked at them straight at them too long, they would take off. The deer are prey, even though they're pretty fast. They're prey. They're not aggressors. They run for their lives when they need to. They hide. They come out in the shadows, kind of a thing. So fear is an important thing for all prey, to be able to detect early enough to get to a safe place. And if you think of man being in jungles or on the prairies, in the woods, they would have to do the same thing. They'd have to be alert enough to hear or see or smell. We don't have good smellers. To be able to get into a safe place. Those that didn't have enough fear could be caught by a predator. Those that were paralyzed with fear could be caught. So we had to have enough fear to get into a safe place. And so one of the reasons this became interesting to me is we always think of man as, what's the difference between man and animals? Well, we're intelligent, more intelligent. Well, were we always? You know, if you think of it just from a biological standpoint, it's not, say, a religious standpoint, but biologically, the thing that would have made man different was to have enough fear to get to a safe place, then have enough ability to come up with a plan. And if they could come up with a plan, then they might be able to defend themselves, make a tool, do something that would protect them to live through this incident. So, enough fear, but not too much, not too little. How do you find that middle ground? Well, modern man, we don't have the issues of forests and jungles and being out in the open spaces with predators very much, at least not most of you who are watching this. We're usually pretty safe. And if something happens suddenly, like say a near miss in a car, you know, our system will have this fight or flight reaction, but probably settle down pretty quickly if we get through it. And the weirdness is that adrenaline, that fight or flight rush, the heart pounding, the blood pressure up, the blood sugar up, the pit of the stomach feeling that can happen with fight or flight, the adrenaline stays in our system even if we realize all of a sudden, oh, it's okay, I actually am safe. Well, that was a false alarm. It'll stay in the system, and it takes a little time for it to settle down, for it not to keep revving the system up. So sometimes doing something physical, or doing a relaxation exercise, doing something that very much distracts one from what happened. Those things can be helpful, and it will wind out. But continuing agitation, continuing struggle with fear, with uncertainty, with a sense of threat, with what might happen, can go beyond the fight or flight reactions. So besides the adrenaline that I talked about, there's cortisol that gets released in emergency situations. And while adrenaline can wind out of your system slower than we want, if we want it to, if we know we're safe, the cortisol kind of stays on. And its purpose, bodily purpose, is that if we're in the situation of fight or flight, it helps, it's kind of a natural cortisone. It helps repair muscles, it helps reduce inflammation if we got into a big thrash. The trouble is, it doesn't burn out of your system as fast. And when somebody has ongoing anxiety, ongoing fear, if somebody keeps this image of the fearful thing, the fearful situation going through their head, that cortisol keeps getting released, and it doesn't go away very quickly. And so what happens if you have higher levels of cortisol that lasts longer in your system? Well, one is it interferes with sleep. It adds to a sense of anxiety, of sense of threat, a sense of unease. It can reduce the immune system function. What are some of the other things? It sets up for, increased risk of depression, and it messes with our insulin system. It goofs up our whole system of having insulin available to us as we need it. So cortisol is produced by fear, anxiety, threat situations, but it also then sets up for us to feel fear, anxiety, threat, kind of a stressed feeling, and which in the long run, if we start losing our coping resources, sets up for depression. Kind of that long-term stress is what we end up experiencing as depression, in certain kinds of depression anyway, that are caused by the long-term stress. And we don't always realize that these high levels of cortisol and this continuing threat and stress is the reason for the depression. So, good fear is when we take appropriate action, have appropriate caution, when we're prepared, when we're alert, when it helps set us up for responding to a situation and allows us to know that we can go into new situations and deal with and be alert for problems that are overwhelming. It lets us be more resilient and capable feeling. Problem fear is when avoidance takes over, when in the process of not wanting to feel that way, we start avoiding situations, people, places, things, and while that rewards we feel that the reward in the sense of feeling safer, it's a fairly brief reward because the uncertainty of, well, what if it happens again? What if something new happens? This sets us up for having anxiety, having uncertainty, problems, having that avoidance take over, having it become a real pattern in our lives. And as you know from the Wired Together fundamentals videos on anxiety, just the Fire Together, Wire Together video, once you get this pattern in, if you try to change it, the monster so to speak. That's what I call it. Tries to get you to go back to the pattern that feels right. And you know, this is the huge dilemma, is that if you get into a pattern that causes problems but feels better than change, people don't change. How do you go into a situation knowing I need to and I want to make these changes, but I feel worse when I try them? All I try to get people to do is go slowly. Recognize what it is. Recognize it isn't you, it's your brain. It's the way the brain works. And move slowly. Build a sense of being able to get through small issues first and not let the fear monster take over, but get through a small issue, even if it takes weeks or months, before you go on to a next issue. And as always, you've heard this before, if it gets to be too much for you, get professional help. Some of the medications can be a good resource if it gets to be too much, if you just can't follow through, if it's too overwhelming. At the same time, one of the problems with medication is that we can rely on it and not change anything inside. We just feel better, so we just keep doing what we do. So that's a huge problem to me, because then it's almost like being addicted to the medication, because if you go off the medication, nothing's changed. One of the things that helps burn off adrenaline as well as helps moderate the cortisol is exercise. And we're finding that exercise actually is a great resource for depression and stressed feelings. And consider that, but again, go into it slowly, build slowly, don't overwhelm, but be consistent in the changes you make. Okay, if you need extra help, call your employee assistance program, call a therapist, check with your insurance, who are you covered by, get into a support group. Do something beyond these videos. They're only the basics. So, hope this helps, hope it makes sense, and hope you keep listening, or keep watching.